Welcome to What is Going for new thought from the edge of Each week on OMTimes' flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. This week's guest has been inspiring readers and seekers all over the world with his #1 New York Times bestseller, The Book of Awakening. Mark Nepo is author of over 22 books that have sold more than 1 million copies in 20 languages. He's been called one of the finest spiritual guides of our time. In 2015, he was given a Life Achievement Award by AgeNation. In 2016, he was named as one of the 100 most spiritually influential living people by Watkins Mind, Body, Spirit magazine. He was also chosen as one of Oprah Winfrey's and the OWN Network's Super Soul 100, a group of inspired leaders using their gifts and voices to elevate humanity. Here today to elevate us, poet, philosopher, author, and teacher, Mark Nepo, and we're going to be discussing his latest book, The Book of Soul, 52 Paths to Living What Matters. Mark Nepo, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful to be with you, Sandie.
I have to confess, Mark, that you created quite a challenge for me with The Book of Soul. 52 Paths to Living What Matters. One path to be explored each week over the course of a year, each chapter ending with a very thought-provoking question to walk with and a conversation to have with a friend. And this is a weekly show, every one of which has a book that has to be read in the 7 days before the show. Because if I read them too far in advance, I might not retain all the information. So you've pretty much, I would say, blown my circuits. My brain brimmets over. Taking all of this in 7 days is just, it's not fair.
Oh, well, thank you for giving it that attention.
Yeah, every single question, it was like, there's a great one to contemplate. And then it's on to the next one. Oh, goodness, and another one, and another one, and another one. So I'm going to have to go back, I can tell, and read it again and again.
Well, I'm very, as you can tell, I'm very committed to the questions, and I think it's, I'm a long-term cancer survivor, 30 plus years, and I think that experience I think it's the poet in me that sees, and it's the philosopher in me that tries to understand what I've seen, but it's the cancer survivor that says, okay, how do we make use of it in our relationships, in our lives? And that's what always leads me to offer the questions.
Yes, yeah. Well, to me, questions are the most powerful teachings of all, because they really do prod you into examining. We can all come up with answers, but when we get a really good question, we have to question our answers. So did you set out to design it this way, or did you find as you were writing the book that each chapter raised its own questions and take it from there?
I did design. I mean, probably going back now several books, but I think if we go back to 7,000 Ways to Listen, that's where I started. My teaching life and my exploring writing life kept merging, and that's when I first started really adding questions to, or maybe even before that, the Book of Stories, As Far as the Heart Can See. But ever since then, every book I very much offer questions as to invite people into the next step, to see to be in conversation with your life and the book, back and forth. And that's why I try to invite people to take time with my books.
As I'm making notes on each question, I'm kind of put in, wow, that's a great one to have a chat with my best friend about. Oh, there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. I don't see her often enough. So you may be putting us together more often in the future.
Wonderful.
Yes, exactly. I mean, and they are so important. I think, the day we stop questioning is the day that we really stop growing and stop living.
Well, and I think that, questions, it's interesting. In the outer world of circumstance, questions certainly have answers. We need to know what things in the supermarket, what the expiration dates, when we pick up something that's edible versus something that's not, what phone number to dial in for our interview. But in the inner world of meaning, questions don't have answers. Questions are doorways to relationship. Questions, I think, we ask a question the way we'd open a door we'd like to walk through with someone. Questions are like kindling on the fire of aliveness. And so they don't have answers in the inner world. They all open pathways.
Yeah, and, certainly for me in a relationship, one of the most important things is how well I and the person I'm in relationship with can have discussions, can philosophize, can, bat back and forward with our questions and our answers, and how open we can be to each other's, thought processes.
Absolutely. And I think this also is that we're more together than alone, which is the title of one of my previous books about community. But it's by being in that conversation. And now, when so many of us are sheltered in place, we need to open up those conversations more than ever.
We do. It's been said that you devote your thinking, writing and teaching to the journey of inner transformation and the life of relationship. You've just said that yourself. When did your fascination with transformation and relationship begin?
Oh my God, I think it began early in life because I was, opened up and transformed, and it became a great teacher for me. So I think probably the first, the earliest time that I was really aware of it was, which is how I started writing in high school. The first woman I fell in love with dumped me and broke my heart, and which is archetypal. Everyone has to go through that. And then as I started, I wasn't a loner, but I had a lot of acquaintances in high school, but I didn't really have any what you'd call real friends until I got to college. So I started writing as a way to process the heartache. And as I started to heal, I became aware, even at that teenage age, that I wasn't writing to myself. I had begun a conversation with the universe, with life. And then, in my early 30s, I almost died from a rare form of lymphoma. And that, was my great teacher in terms of the life of transformation. I was turned upside down and inside out. And it's from there that, I became a student of all paths. I was raised Jewish, and I have a great tie to the Jewish heritage. But I practice all paths, and that's because going through that very difficult period, and still blessed to be here, I was not all those years ago, and I'm still not wise enough to know what worked and what didn't. And so I feel I was challenged to believe in everything. And so all my books, all my teachings, everything that I explore really tries to affirm what I feel is the unnameable common center of all traditions, the unique gifts of each, and through the questions, how do we find where that lives in our individual lives.
How long, if I might ask, were you engaged in your journey with cancer?
Well, the heat of the journey was 3 years, and it first manifested as a tumor in my skull bone that grew both ways. It was pressing on my brain and growing out. It was very large. And within 10 months of harrowing tests and all kinds of things, I was very close to having a craniotomy, and which the chief kind of byproducts of that could easily have been memory loss and speech loss, which for me, my God, would be devastating. When it really was a miracle that tumor vanished, and I was spit out of the mouth of the whale of cancer like Jonah back into life. And then a year later, there had been, because it wasn't as dramatic, there had been a small sister tumor on a rib in my back, and that now grew. And that was very despairing at that point for me, because I had felt, did I waste the miracle? Did I do something wrong? Did I not live well enough? All of those things. And then, I had to have that rib surgically removed. And then I had to have 3.5 months of very aggressive chemotherapy, which almost killed me. And so I learned that miracle is a process and not an event. And the real miracle is that we think of miracle as extraordinary events in ordinary time, but the real transformation was I was scoured so that I could see the miraculous in the ordinary.
Would you say that was one of the most important lessons that you learned from cancer?
Well, I think one of the most important lessons was, and let me say too that, I think everyone will be given the opportunity to be dropped into the depth of life. It doesn't always have to be life-threatening situations. What is opened in us is always more important than what opens us. And it just as easily could have been beauty or wonder or unconditional love or surprise, or tenderness. But for me, it happened to be cancer. And so that's, what I can report on. I think the two biggest lessons for me from that journey is that I've always, certainly following being a student of all paths, but, I woke up on the other side of that, and my mind has served my heart and not the other way around ever since. My heart has been my greatest teacher, and the mind has been the most incredible tool. And that we have this incredible innate wisdom in us. Emerson had said that everyone, whatever question we would ask about life is hidden like a hieroglyphic in our experience, and we don't understand it till we live it. And so what I learned is that everybody has their own language of wisdom, and it's only by living authentically and honestly that we decode that language one word at a time, by one experience at a time.
Yes, I agree. With over 22 books in print, you've clearly never been lost for words. I have to wonder, where does your inspiration come from?
Well, this really comes from that sense of the lens of the miraculous in the ordinary, because, like any artist or writer, I was taught when I was young, be observant, be on the look for good material, things worthy of writing about. Well, then, I was, blown upside down, inside out, and I realized everything is good material. Everything holds the mystery and secret. Just like X and Y chromosomes are in our DNA, all of life is encoded. Well, in one moment that we give our entire presence and heart to, all of life is encoded in everything we bring our heart to. So it's not about looking for good material to write about. It's being a devoted explorer. And when I can be present enough, everything writes itself. Everything reveals its secret hidden in the open.
So you never ever feel like I'm done. I've said all I've got to say. There's always more.
No. But of course I get tired. I'm human. I get exhausted. But that's a sign to stop, restore, refresh, so that I can give my full attention again. Because if I stop seeing the miracle, it's not that the miracle of life has stopped emanating itself. It's that I, being human, it's like a radio station. The signal's always sending, but my radio may not pick it up all the time.
Yeah. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is philosopher, teacher, and prolific author of more than 22 books, including the New York Times bestseller, The Book of Awakening, Mark Nepo. And we're talking about his latest book, The Book of Soul, 52 Paths to Living What Matters. We'll be back with more from Mark Nepo after the break.
The future of internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes' flagship radio show, What Is Going On. As a long-time editor, book judge, spiritual magazine publisher and radio host, I've read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors and teachers. So I know what's worth reading and what isn't. Now, with the spiritual book market growing increasingly crowded, more and more people are seeking my help in finding the authentic voices, the empowering tools, and the genuine skip the BS guidance that will make the most difference to their spiritual development. So I decided to make it easier by bringing my knowledge, experience, and considerable network of contacts together in the No BS Spiritual Book Club. There are no ads, no joining fees, no obligations, and no BS. Just an ever-growing library compiled by recognizable and respected names of the 10 best books that help them the most on their journeys, plus free book excerpts, audios, and live video interviews where you can quiz them about their spiritual journeys and their 10 best list choices. Your time and money are valuable, your spiritual journey even more so. If you're looking for genuine guidance from people who've walked this path before you, check out Sedgbeer.com. Click on the No BS Spiritual Book Club tab and join the club. That's Sedgbeer.com, SEDGBEER.com. I'll see you there.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance between yourself and others is critical to slowing the spread of coronavirus. So here are ways to stay in contact without the physical contact part. Call, send a text, set up a video conference, post on social media, dedicate a song on the radio. If you have symptoms of fever, dry cough, and shortness of breath, call your healthcare provider before going to their office. For more info, visit coronavirus.gov.
Let's all do our part, because we're all #alone together. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Mark Nepo, The Book of Soul. How do you define soul? What does that word mean to you?
Well, for me, I would say soul is the unnameable portion of universal spirit that each of us carry while we're here. And the inner voice, whatever we call that, and for me it's through my heart, is what connects us with the larger well of spirit. So, you just imagine we have a bluebird house out in our backyard that my wife has put up, and wonderfully we have had bluebirds. But, imagine the bluebird has that little piece of sky in that little house, and then it flies out into the sky, and then it comes back into its home in the little bitty house. Well, this is very much what it's like to be a spirit in a body and time on earth. We can't live in the big formless sky, which is all spirit of all time, and we have to live in our body, in our home, in our relationships. And our heart is the bird that goes back and forth, that joins us. And all the traditions have different names for this, Atman, Dharma, Buddha nature, the Holy Spirit, Yahweh, on and on, Rilke called it inwardness. Gerard Manley Hopkins called it inscape as opposed to landscape. Emerson called the universal soul, the oversoul. Jung called it the collective unconscious. But whatever name we give to it, we are a living part in a living whole. And I love how the Hindu tradition speaks about that. We carry the well-known today namaste, which means I bow or salute or honor the piece of universal spirit that resides in you. And so because our lives, everything alive, trees, everything, that we're containers for spirit, and the spirit lives on, but the container, of course, that's what a lifetime is. The container forms and then erodes, dissolves. So the question for all of us is, can I be a good steward of the portion of spirit that I have been entrusted with while I'm here?
That's a very good question. A very good question. And as I said earlier, the book is full of them, and the topics that you cover, every single one of them is so important to reading about it and then coming, to the question to walk with, and you really sink into that question. One of the sections in the book, one of the chapters, one of the questions that really struck me, which is something that I think is endemic in our society right now, and probably is reaching heights that it hasn't reached in 50, 60 years or more, and that is fear, which is being propagated in virtually every area of our life. And,
yes.
There's so many fears. I mean, apart from all of the ones we're facing today, they're the ones that we always carry with us. Fear of revealing ourselves, fear of rejection, fear of pain, loss, disconnection, and paradoxically, fear of connection. Let's talk about fear a little. And let's start by talking about fear in the context of what we're experiencing right now, which is,
yeah, sure.
the fallout of COVID.
Yeah, sure. So fear, and of course, as we talk about things, I have no answers, but what I share are examples, not instructions. And I think fear has its proper place when it's right-sized. Fear, of course, is there to alert us to legitimate danger. But being human, we inflate fear as if it will give us added protection. And it just makes it bigger. And so the one of the questions always for us as humans is, how do I have the fear live in me and integrate with the rest of my being and humanness, and not me fall in and drown in my fear? So how do we right size it? And this has to do a lot with seeing things as they are, being present, being honest, seeking help when it's difficult to get out of my fear. Then I have to turn to someone. But let's back up a minute and let's talk just for briefly about the nature of fear, and then about fear in our time with the pandemic. So I have found, because when I know these things because I violate them all the time. That's how we learn. Medieval monks said, when asked how they practiced their faith, by falling down and getting up. I love that because I know it. So fear, when I was going through my cancer journey, I had never been through anything like that. I was 31. I was terrified of everything. And I exhausted my heart because I couldn't keep it up. Because on a scale of 1 to 10, everything I met was a 14. And so one of the things that but like it or not, my heart started to say, no, you have to discern. What is that? You may be afraid, you may be uncomfortable, you may be agitated. You have to start discerning. Everything can't be a 12-alarm fire because we'll exhaust ourselves. And so fear gets its power from not looking. And fear so one of the quiet courages that faces everyone who's ever lived is, how do we look at what we fear so we can right-size it? And, a great example of this for me was during my cancer journey. Everybody, different processes. We put all of our fear into different tests or procedures or whatever. And for me, it was I had to have bone marrow samplings, which, were horrible for me. And I was terrified of the next one. And the only way through it was to recognize, it had become an impenetrable wall. And then somehow it occurred to me that the actual procedure, distasteful as it was, lasted like 25 seconds. And so I had to look at what I feared and said, okay, that doesn't mean I don't like it anymore, but there is life beyond those 25 seconds. Mm. And that enabled me to say, I need to get through those 25 seconds. And then it enabled me to say, okay, in order to do that, I need loved ones to help me get through that 25 seconds. But then the fear was in my life and I wasn't in the life of fear. So the other thing is that fear gets its power from the future and the past. Yes. The present, even if it's painful, is known. It's when we project it out, like I did with that, my fear of what could happen again, what might happen again, got bigger and bigger and bigger. So when we look at where we are today, I remember when I got diagnosed for cancer, I went into a doctor's office. They told me I had cancer. I was stunned. And then when I went to leave, the door I had come through to keep that appointment was gone. There was no door back to the life I had before that moment. And I feel that this has happened to humanity with the pandemic. The old world is gone. It's not there. And now we have a fear of the future because we don't know what it's going to be like. And this also has engendered great loss because while there are some things about life as we knew it that we shouldn't return to, there were a lot of things we liked and we're fine. So there's loss. So our response to this loss, which is very human, I think of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's Stages of Grief, which, weren't, she offered them, they weren't sequential, but they were a constellation of things that we bounce around in because of loss. And they were anger and denial and bartering and depression and acceptance. And I think we can see that large parts of society are stuck in denial, which in America has made this horribly worse, because there's been 30-40% of our society has refused to accept that the old world is gone. No, we're going to go to the beach, we're going to go to bars, we're going to do all this because I don't want to accept it. And of course, it's just spread the virus like crazy. And there's a part of our society that has stuck in anger. And then we're going to protest wearing masks. So this is, to me, this is astonishing. Like, what are we protesting? Biology? Gravity? We don't like it, but that's absurd. And sooner or later we have to move through our fear and come to acceptance in order to see our way forward. And I don't know that anyone can do this alone. We need each other to do this. And this raises the other thing, that we are being challenged, I think, to have a more intimate relationship with the unknown. We have been schooled and trained in the modern world to believe that the unknown only brings catastrophe. After all, when I was younger, when we only had 3 TV stations, the weather report was called the weather report. Now it's called Storm Watch. Well, last I knew, storm was only one form of weather, where we've been trained toward catastrophe and disaster, but the unknown brings love and beauty and surprise and strength and resilience and kindness. After all, I can't think of one significant relationship in my life, someone I love, friend or significant other, that I ever planned to love.
Exactly. Well, I think the other thing about fear, and especially today, I see an awful lot of people, and I don't, this isn't conscious, it's a projection. They've got all this fear inside them, that many people grow up with, that they don't feel that they can express. And suddenly along comes this pandemic, and they can put it in that direction. It's a great way of expressing anger,
Yes.
expressing concern and anxiety, and it's a great distraction.
Sandie, I lost you there for a second.
Yes, I think I lost you too.
Okay, we're back.
Yeah.
We're back. Yeah.
Good. Did you hear that?
So you said,
I was just saying,
yes,
I thought it was a big distraction. Yes.
Yes, and I think this speaks to, in all the traditions, the power and the courage to speak and be truthful with our experience, to admit the truth of our experience. Often because we're so much in our heads, we're taught to be afraid of our feelings, when our feelings are the lifeline to connecting our spirit with the oneness of life. And so we need to take that risk to be authentic, things are always less acute when we express them. This is, my last book before this book was called Drinking from the River of Light, which is all about the life of expression and the healthy healing journey of expression. And, briefly, I think one of the great examples of this is Beethoven. And, Beethoven to me was obviously an extraordinary talent, genius, but carried by an ordinary man, and that's what makes him heroic. And, he went deaf by the time he was 28. And, of course, imagine you were born to bring music that has never been heard on earth into the world, and you're not going to be able to ever hear it played. It's just crushing. So crushing that he contemplated suicide. And he went to a small town outside of Vienna in 1802, Heiligenstadt, told everyone it was a retreat, solitude. But really, he was planning to commit suicide. He actually began a note. The power of expression, here's a great example. The healing power of telling the truth is he wrote out how horrible and awful and how he couldn't bear it. But instead of, when he got to the end of the note, instead of resolving to kill himself, he wound up saying, and so I guess I'll go back to Vienna and I'll make the most music I can with what I have for as long as I can. And that letter is now known as the Heiligenstadt Testament. He put that in his top desk drawer, never to be discovered till after his death, and he proceeded in what most people consider a decade of creating musical masterpieces.
Yeah.
The power of speaking the truth.
Yes. Yeah, the power indeed. You're listening to what is going on. I'm just going to go to break now, Mike.
Yes, sure.
Let's continue this when we come back. You're listening to What is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with poet, philosopher, author, and teacher Mark Nepo. We're talking about his extremely thought-provoking new title, The Book of Soul, 52 Paths to Living What Matters. We'll be back with more from Mark Nepo after the break.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
Hello, I'm Lisa Berry. Join me every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for Light on Living, a chance to see new, hear different, and feel more as I shine the spotlight on all the ways to lighten the load of life's challenges. Light on Living is your link to that new way you're looking for, that new understanding that will enhance your life, and that positive connection that will support your growth. So join me and you'll gain insight and start to see things in a new way that motivates you.
I am Fidel Nshambo. I was born in a city called Bukavu in the Congo. We were a loving family, and then, boom, everything that I had disappeared in a single day. People think that when you are a refugee and they resettle you to America and all your problems are done. They don't understand that that's the beginning of everything. I was not born a refugee. I was made one.
It's time we welcome refugee families with open arms. Learn more at embracerefugees.org, brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Mark Nepo, this show is going far too fast for my liking. too much to cover and not enough time. You were talking about Beethoven and what we can learn from his story, as well as many of the stories in your book about fear and about, one of the things that really caught my attention in your book was the whole section on finitude. And again, this to me is also intermingled with fear, is the contradictions in our life, the contradictions between what we do, what we want to do, what we don't do because we're afraid to do it or we're afraid of what somebody else might say. This is a topic that there's no way we can even begin to do anything other than skim across the top of it. But I'd like you to just address this a little, because I think,
sure.
There's a saying that I have said many, many times, is that we cannot separate who we are from how we interact with the world. And yet that's exactly what we do. because of fear.
Well, yes, and certainly, Sandie, we can begin to talk about it, and I'm happy to have another conversation at another time to go further with things. Well, what I use in that chapter, which is a real, very, very troubling, and I use it as an example of what we're talking about. That yes, integrity is understood in a functional way as, who we are and is manifest in what we do. That we say what we mean, we do what we believe, that we're integral, we are whole, which is what integrity means, to make whole. And I use as an example of disintegrity Martin Heidegger, who many people know as a remarkable philosopher of being, one of his great classics, Time and Being. Just a remarkable, I often, as a younger person, had read these amazing insights into the nature of being. And then I was, astonished to learn that he was a willing Nazi and a supporter of Hitler and anti-Semitism. He, in fact, became the dean of the University of Freiburg and actively exposed and sought out to Jewish professors, and he remained a supporting Nazi the rest of his life through the whole war. So how are we supposed to put this together? How are we supposed to, that, here, he would be vile and violent and persecuting, and then he'd go back to his office and close his door and write about the ontological nature of being and the emanation of light and all things and how we're all, one. No. This is, so the questions, of course, are, because a lot of people will say, well, take the best and leave the rest. Does this make his insights invalid? And and honestly, I don't know. When we push it to an extreme, I'd say, yes, it does make it invalid. Certainly when we back up on the spectrum, we're all human. So there's a difference if I aspire, like I've talked about fear with you, I've talked about these things, but I'm the first to say, I can't always, I do drown in my fear sometimes. That's how I know. And then I have to climb back out of it. So there's a difference in seeing truth and then saying, okay, I can tell you, share this, and then like all the rest of us, I will struggle to aspire to it. Yes. But at least I am integral in that I'm trying. But that's different from wholesale, divorce of actions from being and from intent. So, what makes it hypocrite? Yes, we can, there are people who maybe their gift is they can have a vision of something, but they have trouble living it out because they're human. But at a certain point when that breaks, it becomes hypocrisy. And I think that it does mitigate some of what Heidegger wrote about when we learn how he lived his life.
Yeah. And we all carry these contradictions. We can all have very lofty aspirations, attaining them. We're human. We're human. And sometimes I think, we can't transcend being human, and we're not meant to, I don't think. I think we're here for a reason.
Yes, and it's not that we're expected to be perfect and always align with everything we aspire to. But when Browning had said, man's reach should exceed his grasp. So yes, we always, reach and see what's possible. But then our humility is to own that being human, we won't reach that. And when I fall down, see, I think the difference between we all inadvertently hurt each other because we're human and have limitations. But I think evil is causing deliberate hurt.
Yes.
So that's one thing to aspire to being, like we were talking about with Heidegger, and to fall in an attempt to live up to it, but deliberately then going out and persecuting and hurting others is deliberate evil, deliberate hurt, and that is evil, and that is hypocrisy. So let me share with you, this is an amazing example of integrity, unexpected integrity, and that's Nietzsche. Now, the great, philosopher Nietzsche, who his early work, is all very willful and Superman, and we're going to bend the universe to what we aspire to, and all of that, which I don't, I've never really felt a resonance with. But then I discovered this amazing quote from later Nietzsche that was so different, it just stopped me. He said, I want to see what is necessary as beautiful, so I can be one of those who makes things beautiful.
Yeah.
I want to see what is necessary as beautiful, so I can be one of those who makes things beautiful. And I think, in terms of where we are today, that could be the anthem of our day. How do we make the washing of hands beautiful and a ritual? How do we make wearing a mask beautiful and a symbol that we are each other, and that when we take care of one, we take care of all? So, but the story, to go back to Nietzsche's life, I said, well, where did this come from? It's so different. I don't understand. So I looked into his life. Nietzsche lived to be 54, and at 44, he had a striking incident that was some considered a breakdown, but he was living in Italy, in Turin, Italy, over a piazza, an apartment on the second floor, when he heard someone whipping a horse. And he looked out and he saw someone whipping their horse. And for some reason, whatever it was that day, it went right through to his heart and it cracked him. He couldn't stand it. And he ran out into the piazza and he said, "Stop." And the man, of course, said, "Who are you? This is my horse. I'll do what I want. Get out of here." And Nietzsche threw his arms around the neck of the horse and stood between the whip and the whipped. And he was never the same. And I would say to you that for all his brilliance of mind, all of that was an apprenticeship, because that moment was the poem of his life.
Yeah.
And it's after that moment that his entire philosophy shifted. And it's after that moment that he wrote that quote that I shared. And there are many people who believe in early Nietzsche, who want to say, yeah, forget everything that came after. He had a breakdown. But mystics and spiritual writers like Maya Baba, who is a Hindu, a contemporary mystic, he's now gone, he wrote and said, no. Forget everything that came before. That was his moment of transformation.
Yeah, that's what you term a mythic moment, and we all have them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we can't plan them, and we don't know when they're going to be, but we can stay open. And, Rilke said, and I think this also speaks to how we meet fear. Rilke said, "Let everything happen, beauty and terror. No one feeling is final. Keep going." And so one thing that I've learned about fear is I think I may have written it in this book. Fear is to be moved through, not obeyed. When I'm afraid, if I ask my fear, what should I do? My fear is going to say, be more afraid. I thought you'd never ask. No, I need to ask my soul what to do. I need to ask that inner voice, that spirit. I need to ask those I love what to do.
Yeah. I've always said that fear is in the waiting room. And the waiting room is not, it's not a destination, it's a way station. So, that dovetails
That's wonderful.
With what you just said. Mark, we only have about 5 minutes left, and I do want you to share before we close the events that you've got coming up. But first, I'm going to pick one question out of the many that I still have left for you. And if you can give us a fairly concise answer to it, I'd really appreciate it. You say in your acknowledgements for this book that each book you write is a surprise in how it calls and unfolds, never quite what you imagine, but you're grateful for what each book opens and how each book transforms you. How did this one transform you?
Well, this book transformed me by bringing more deeply. The last chapter, as you know, is called The Temple is the World. And I think that one of the things that I was inquiring with this book, we all do have, like that birdhouse, we talked about earlier, we all do have, whether it's a formal, it's a temple, it's a sangha, it's a sanctuary, it's a church, it's a mosque, or a family, or the sanctity of relationship. We all have these things that incubate our spirit. But what I think this book, Inquiry, brought me further into in my own life is the temple is the world. We learn how to be strong and whole there in those sacred spaces so that the walls can come down, because what's sacred is everywhere. So that's how this transformed me and affirmed for me to, just as I want to be who I am everywhere, I want to practice sanctity everywhere and not just in the designated holy spaces. Mm-hmm. So thank you also. Like, I'm learning, like everyone, to teach online because, so much of my life I love being in circle with people. And it's been my lifeblood, so I was very alarmed. Talk about fear when this all happened. And my God, am I going to ever be able to do what I love again? And thankfully, with the help of my team and friends, I am seeing that, it's wonderful to work online, and it's not exactly the same, of course, as being together, but there is a lot of meaning and presence and real connection and exchange. So I have begun. I did a first webinar in June, and there are two more events that I have planned. One is, and if you go to live.marknepo.com, folks can register. There's a free reading and conversation I will hold on August 29th from 1 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And that's free, and people can register there. And once that's done, starting September 1, people can register. In October, I will offer a 3-session webinar on 3 successive Sundays, October 4, 11, and 18. And people can register from September 1 on, also at live.marknepo.com. And those will be from 1 to 2:30 Eastern Time. And that will focus on more together than alone, the power and spirit of community, and how we can help each other through these times by discovering who we are and how we're connected.
Today, what we're seeing more than anything with pandemic is an incredible sense of community coming to the fore, and at the same time, the complete opposite. So, the polarization is there, the Red Sea's parted, and I think this is something that is really important to look at.
Well, I do believe it's important, and I do believe that, when we fear difference, then all we do, education becomes, we only seek information that will confirm what we already know. Yeah. But that's not education, really. No. Real education is, I need to know what I don't know. That's why I've written so many books, because I write about what I don't know. If I'd written about what I know, I would have written very little.
Mark Nepo, it's been an absolute delight to have this time with you today. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the other questions I had, but another time for sure.
Oh, thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
You too. Thank you, Mark. For more information about Mark Nepo and his books and events, visit marknepo.com. You can also visit 3intentions.com. And don't forget those events, August 29th, and the one that's also 3-session webinar, October the 4th, 11th and the 18th. And you can register for those at live.marknepo.com. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. You can learn more about me and the No BS Spiritual Book Club at sedgbeer.com. I'll be back next week with another edition of What is Going On at the same time. Till then, it's goodbye from me.